Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. An intriguing collaboration was announced last week between Weihenstephan and Jack's Abbey, a fest beer that will be released just in time for the autumn celebrations. The brewers are here for a conversation about tradition and modern brewing and creating a beer worthy of both breweries. But first, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. You can listen to shows like Beer Travelers, Brewer to Brewer, and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. This show and all of the work we do, it's supported by you. Please visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer. A few bucks goes a long way to keep the content fresh, and everything goes to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. If you'd like to learn more about advertising on this show, please email info@allaboutbeer.com. If you plan on being in Colorado in a few weeks for the Great American Beer Festival, and you should, you need to check out the Denver Rare Beer Tasting. It happens on September 22nd and brings together 64 of America's best craft breweries, all for a great cause, the Pints for Prostates campaign. The beer list is incredible, packed with rare, exotic, and vintage beers you won't find anywhere else. These are legendary beers the breweries hold back just for the Denver Rare Beer Tasting. This is a bucket list event for both beer fans and for brewers. You can get a look at the beer list and find more information at pintsforprostates.org. All-inclusive tickets are just $200 and include unlimited beer samples, a great buffet lunch, t-shirt, tasting glass, and a program. Money raised goes to the fight against prostate cancer, including a free health screening before the event. It's a simple blood test that checks for common health issues that might just save your life. That's the Denver Rare Beer Tasting, drinking beer and saving lives. Last week, Jack's Abbey, the Massachusetts-based lager brewery, announced that it would soon be releasing a collaboration with Weihenstephan, the venerable German brewery. It's called Fest of Both Worlds, and it's brewed with Pilsner and Munich malts, along with Sterling and Adeena hops, and fermented with TUM 3470, which Weihenstephan shared for this beer. At nearly 1,000 years old, Weihenstephan is a brewery of legend around the world, and through a commitment to technical brewing and education, has helped countless brewers and drinkers better understand beer. This collaboration with Jack's Abbey is only the third time Weihenstephan has collaborated with an American brewer. The beer will be available later this month in Massachusetts and in New York. My guests are Jack Hendler. He's the co-founder of Jack's Abbey, and Matthias Ebner. He's the Global Brand Ambassador for Weihenstephan. They're here to talk about the collaboration and so much more. Here's our conversation. I feel like we're at this weird crossroads in American beer right now, where there's so much local choice that some drinkers have forgotten about or put imported beer on the back burner. And there's whole swaths of new generations of drinkers who just aren't even aware of some of the great beer that's available around the world, but that also comes into the US. And so, Matthias, I'm not asking you to speak for your entire country, but as one of probably Germany's most famous brewery, what's the state of beer in Germany right now? What's happening on the ground where you are?
More or less, it's a quite different development here in Germany. If you would maybe look at the past 20 years, then definitely than in the USA. We have here a more like slowing beer market, even going back a little bit. So we're basically losing volume all over Germany the last 20 years, more or less continuously. The only category that is growing and growing strong about in the same time is non-alcoholic beers. So this is a really strong growing segment of the German beer industry. So we have a very vital scene, of course, but also a very traditional scene, which is, I would say, doing actually pretty good. But of course, we have some developments, not just in the beer and alcohol business, although all over the Europe or Germany or the society, that is maybe giving or is maybe going into a direction where maybe beer or alcohol is less consumed and maybe compensated to non-alcoholic beers or non-alcoholic drinks. And this is something we have to deal with. But on my point or the point of Weihenstephan, we are very optimistic when it comes to the future. We have survived nearly 1,000 years, do all the ups and downs that have been in the last 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And we are always optimistic that we will find a way to work in that future markets.
Jack, I know I've had a lot of your lagers in the past, and I know your brewing background and the reverence that you have for tradition, and then also the fun side that you put forward with some of the other beers that the brewery makes or Springdale has made, where you're having some fun and you're getting out of the normal comfort zones. There's so much attention, I think, to what's new or what's different. But where do you see the importance of tradition in today's US beer space?
That's a good question. I think there's two sides to that. There's the ale side, there's a lager side. For us, we only brew lager beer. And certainly when you think about lager beer and how lager beer is developed, you think of Germany, maybe Czech Republic, to get that inspiration. And there's a reason a lot of these traditional methods are used. It creates the beer that you drink. And so if you want to be inspired by the beers from these places, you also then need to bring in those processes into the brewery. So, for us, we brew a lot of decocted beer. So decoction is part of our standard golden lager or house lager. It's a decocted beer. We're using 3470, or it's a very common German lager yeast. We're doing cold fermentation. We're doing long lagering times. These are things that create a certain flavor profile in these beers. It's not necessarily the only way to make lager beer, but it certainly defines the character of our beer through the choices that we make and how we process the beer.
I guess when folks are coming through, are they interested in history, tradition? Is it just about flavor these days? And the process is a nice byproduct, but as long as the beer tastes good, I feel like
that's fair. We've never been able to. I don't know if it's different in Germany, but certainly from our perspective, we have not in any way been able to really promote decoction brewing to consumers. It's a really hard thing to explain, and people don't really get what that means. But I do think they appreciate the finished product. So, we do these things that are hard to explain and we're not going to get any credit for. But when they drink the beer, and even though they don't understand how we made it, they can understand why we put in that effort.
Yeah. Is there interest, Matthias, in the process, in the tradition for the modern drinkers in Germany today?
Hard to say. It really depends. It really depends on to whom you speak. There is a very small but very educated scene, especially also those customers that are into the craft beer scene and more creative or more international beers here in Germany. They definitely talk and take care of things like that. But on the other side, a lot of those traditional techniques that Jack were mentioning are, when it especially comes to mid-sized breweries, so private-owned breweries or traditional breweries, they are basically common standard technologies that brewers are using to create that flavor profiles and that characteristics that what Jack was talking about. And so I guess the people are not thinking so much on that. And in my personal experience, I must say, with the people I had to do when I traveling the US and representing our brand, is that people that are getting into beers, and especially the craft beer scenery in the US is way much bigger than anywhere else in the world, that those people are very, very educated in beer and brewing, and even decoction maybe is a very complex matter to explain. But I guess there are in the US more people that would appreciate such a technique or understanding it and what brings it to beer and how to bring this characteristic to a beer. I guess that there is a much bigger potential than maybe in Germany, where decoction, maybe the people don't know what it really means in the most perspective, but they know that this is a traditional thing and a lot of breweries does it. So it's a different kind of perspective or level where we viewing onto these markets. And I personally must say I really appreciate what Jack is doing, because he's doing that so precisely when it comes to the Jack's Abbey beers. I've now been a few times to the brewery, and of course intensely made up my mind on Jack's beers. But they are very well made, very thought through, how to put recipes together, how to create recipes, how to give the beer its time, because even Jack were mentioning a few techniques. I always say that one of the most important things, the most important technique in brewing beer is being patient. To know that you need to let the beer work, because there are biochemical pathways that are going on while fermentation, while maturing the beer, while lagering the beer, that you need to wait. If you want to brew clean beers without any adjunctions or additional enzymes or whatever, you just need to let nature work, and you can create an environment like with cold lagering or horizontal lager tanks and stuff like that. You can create with your process or with your equipment an environment where those natural biochemical processes can work, and there you create a beer. And in the end, most of those things, you just need to create this environment and let it happen. But sometimes this takes time and patience, and letting the beer, mature and let the taste create. This is a value that maybe brewers forgot about due to the pressure of output or, whatever other reasons there are. But most of the time, the big secret is just be patient and let the beer get its time. With other beverages or foods, nobody is thinking about, oh great, I have a scotch that is just matured a year, so it's much quicker than the 14-year-old, so I can make 14 times the volume of scotch than whatever I would make with a 14-year-old matured whiskey. That's not the way it works. A lager beer needs to lager. That's why they're called lager beers. And so this most important value, giving the beer its time, is something that I saw in Jack's Abbey. And this is something I see in traditional breweries here in Germany or in the Czech Republic, and also see in our brewery in Weihenstephan. Just let the things happen. Nature is doing it.
Whenever I hear, it makes so much sense talking about time and patience from 1,000-year-old brewery, because you've had yes. that ability. Jack, how important is patience for you, and how frustrating can it be at times?
It's critical. I mean, you can produce lager beer, and you can produce very nice lager beer pretty quickly, depending on what you're trying to do. but it would be tough to call a beer a Helles, or to call a beer a Bock beer, or to call a beer a Fest beer if you're just putting it out in 2 weeks. So, all the beers that we brew here that we're going to call a traditional style of beer, it's got to get the corresponding amount of time in order for those flavors to mature. One of those things I tell people on tours when they come here is like, look at this fermentation cellar we have here. And if we were to stop brewing the way we were brewing, we could produce twice the amount of beer if we were brewing, say, pale ale and IPA, because we wouldn't need to give the time. So the investment on our end is enormous, particularly as a small brewer, someone who's only been in business for 10 years. We have double the capital expenses because we believe that that's important for the beers that we brew. And, maybe we have a similar outlook where I'm more worried about what people are going to think about our beer in 10 years, 20 years, versus just trying to put more beer out today. So we're certainly taking a long-term approach, knowing that we need to make much larger investments, but we want the quality of beer to be what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a critical thing, like Jack said, because you need maybe double or triple time the tanks than you would need maybe just producing ales, because the beer is sitting much longer in their lagering tanks, and when you just see the numbers, maybe from an economical standpoint, they see, oh, I have one tank, and if I'm producing a pale ale, I could do a volume of maybe 500 barrels a year, and if I took the same tank and I produce lagers, I can only do 200 barrels a year with that tank, and then you say, hey, maybe let's produce another style of beer, because there we can get more output. But this does not work with lager beers, so you must commit to the time, and you must commit to the equipment, so that you need more tanks, you need more space, and all these things. So that's the thing. If you want to brew lager beers in a precise German or Czech, I would say Czech tradition, then you need also to commit to investments and commit to time. That's absolutely critical.
Particularly in the U.S., and it's changing, is that, and it's very different from in Germany, where lager beer is considered of the highest quality, but it's not necessarily always considered that way here in the U.S. Certainly, lager beer has had a bit of a reputation, and certainly it's sort of known as industrial light lager here in the U.S. And part of what we're trying to do here is trying to show the value proposition of what really great lager beer can be, similar to how it's regarded in Germany.
I dig that. I want to jump back to something that Matthias said early on about the growth of non-alcoholic beers, because that's something that I know a lot of brewers are looking at and thinking about here in the US, which is a huge cultural shift, even in the last 5 or so years. And Jack, I know you've played around with very low ABV. What was it, the 2% beer project that you had a couple years ago that I loved so much?
Yeah, absolutely. The 2% beer project was something that was really interesting to us, where we were trying to get a feel for what sort of market there might be for not necessarily non-alcoholic, but people who were concerned about alcohol consumption. The challenge with non-alcoholic beer is that there's a lot of extra steps that are needed, that investments that needs to be made in order to create that. So the market needs to be there to make those investments, whether it's dealcoholization or it's a pasteurization step, in order to make sure that the product is stable in the can or bottle. Definitely an interesting space, and something that we're certainly would like to look into. But some of the challenges for a brewery of our size makes it a little bit more difficult to really get into the non-alcoholic space.
Matthias, what's fueling the growth or the interest in Germany for the non-alcoholic? It seems like there's a easier acceptance to consumers wanting to drink the beer than maybe there is in the US.
Yeah, definitely. And there are a few points. There's not this just one reason. I think this developed over the last 20, 30 years a little bit. And there are numerous reasons why non-alcoholic beers is playing a big role in Germany. And it is the more or less only growing category of the last 20 years. So actually, we decided to make non-alcoholic beers in 1994. So it started as a science project in 1994, and Professor Buck approached the brewery and brought this piece of technology into here, and we started making non-alcoholic wheat beers. But this was just as a science idea and science project at that time. Over the years, it became bigger, and also the non-alcoholic beers became a big selling point. And today, if you look on the category, it's actually non-alcoholic beers, the number 3 position in our brewery.
Wow.
And yes. And after the wheat beer and the lager beer, so after our Hefeweiss beer and our original premium lager, non-alcoholic is the number 3 if you're putting export and national market together overall when it comes to the volume. So this is very interesting, and actually nearly 30 years of experience working with a dealcoholization. Of course, we have a lot of experience, not just making it, but also fine-tuning of the technology. And actually, this was our mission we had at that time. So the university were doing over years trials here in our brewery, fine-tuning the installation, working on the technology, analyzing the beers and all that stuff. So this is something where we really, really profited out of our partnership with the university here as a state brewery. And so this category, we really lived it over the last 30 years. But yeah, like Jack said, it's not that easy making non-alcoholic beers. There are a few technologies. Is it biological way to make a non-alcoholic beer, or the physical way of making non-alcoholic beer? And we decided to go with the physical way, or more or less the university decided to go that way.
Yeah.
And but we are very, very happy with that we came on board on that trend so early. And then there are other factors here in Germany that brought that to big thing. There is another brewery who, really invested into non-alcoholic beers like 20 years ago and made it a sports drink. So they said with their non-alcoholic, they sponsored, here in the Alpine region, very popular, of course, skiers and ski jumping and biathlon and cross-country skiing. And they were sponsoring sports events and cycling and all that stuff, because non-alcoholic beer, especially non-alcoholic wheat beer, is actually, if you put out the alcohol, is a quite healthy drink, and it's an isotonic drink. So for intense sports and workout, it's a perfect drink to refuel what the body lost on minerals, on vitamins, also on calories during an intense sport or workout unit.
Yeah.
And so they advertised it that way and made out of non-alcoholic wheat beer quite a sports drink. And so this became very, very popular, from soccer to winter sports. And so then this became a thing. And after non-alcoholic beers became a very popular sports drink, I would say here in Germany, it's like the same like a Gatorade in the US, And I think it's more in a German tradition or more cultural background of Germany to drink a beer after a workout, or a non-alcoholic beer, because it's cultural closer to you than a soda or than to such a lemonade drink,
Yeah.
And actually, in the end, it's also healthier because there are no artificial or no additional sugars into it. It's just a natural fermented grain-based non-alcoholic beverage, And actually, on that base, it's also a clean label product, which is also very popular today. The people want to see and to read or to understand what they are consuming. Like organic food or like a clean label product are more and more popular these days, because the people are thinking about their nutrition, what they're eating and consuming. And the beer and also non-alcoholic beer produced on the basis of the Bavarian purity law is just 4 ingredients. No other aromas, no coloring, no enzymes, no sugar, no nothing, And so people have a clean label product that is naturally produced, where there's no alcohol in it, which is tasty. And when it comes to the taste of beer, it's very cultural, very close to them. And another factor is, of course, a society that is maybe getting older. So like my father, due some health reasons and his age, he does not drink a lot of alcohol anymore. So he switched to non-alcoholic beers. So he still goes drinking beer, but then he just went from Hefeweißbier to non-alcoholic Hefeweißbier.
Yeah.
And health reasons to his age, whatever. And a lot of elderly people here in Germany, so maybe their doctors say, oh, well, don't drink so much or don't drink any alcohol at all anymore. Yeah, okay, but they still can drink non-alcoholic beers. And so I guess there are a few factors of that comes from a cultural side, from the society, from also an aging society, that gives here in Germany a very fruitful base that non-alcoholic beers became that kind of important product and also business.
Jack, when you hear that, do you think there's continued growth in the US for that category?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's growth in that category. I don't know if it's going to be the same as in Germany. I don't know that non-alcoholic beer will ever be considered an after sports drink, but who knows what it'll be like in 10 years. For me, the most interesting thing of this whole story, though, is sort of how the school interacts with the brewery, because you think about this brewery that's the oldest in the world, that has 1,000 years of history, but on the flip side, they're sort of cutting edge and ahead of these trends. They were doing research at school, so they got the brewery involved, and it's very interesting just how many how the technology and how ahead of some of the curves the brewery is, considering how old and traditional it is. And it's kind of cool to see how they're able to get out in front of something that's coming from the students. From our perspective, part of this collaboration was we were able to actually bring in the yeast from Freising, from the brewery, which is a new product that they haven't really sold in the US. And we brewed this beer with yeast that they created the protocol at the university so that they could start shipping their yeast around the world. So when you get 3470, sort of the most famous German lager yeast, you're not getting it from the actual source. And now we're able to actually brew with that yeast that comes from the university because of this technology that they've been able to develop there. And that partnership between the students, the university, and the brewery is just very interesting to me.
All right. Well, you brought it up. So let's talk about this collaboration, Fest of Both Worlds. This is a collaboration between the two breweries. It's available in certain markets as of the airing of this particular show. But tell me about this beer.
Sure. So this beer is a collaboration that we came up with based around the idea of a fest beer. The beer is called the Fest of Both Worlds, and it's bringing ideas both from both breweries to create a product that showcases things that are important to both of us. And we started our relationship, I don't know, it's many years ago now. And we've done a lot of events around Oktoberfest because it's for both of us, we have a very important product in Fest beer or Oktoberfest, and we were doing events together. And so when we started talking about this collaboration, Fest beer absolutely made the most sense to brew together. So I had mentioned earlier about decoction brewing and long lagering times. So we're bringing some of those really important processes into this beer. So it's a decoction brewed. It's fermented with the yeast from Freising. It is lagered for 2 months in a horizontal lagering tank. It's using all imported German Pilsner malts and hops. And we are also, sorry, not German hops, just the German malts. I made a little mistake there. All the hops are American hops, though. And what we're doing is using a unique American process called cool pooling. So when we are done boiling this beer, when we transferred it to the whirlpool, we cooled the beer down to about 175 degrees to add the hops. So by doing this process, we get a lot of the flavor of the hops without getting the bitterness of the hops. And so the beer will present slightly hoppy, fruity, but then finishes like a traditional fest beer, sweet and malty, and sort of has that balance of both the American influence and the German influence.
I get tripped up on this all the time where people talk about fest beer and then they talk about Oktoberfest beer. Is there a difference?
Well, not in the style. It's Oktoberfest beer when it's brewed for Oktoberfest in Munich from one of the six Munich breweries that are on and allowed to be in Oktoberfest. And it's a registered trademark. So you can only call it Oktoberfest here in Germany or in Europe when you are Oktoberfest beer. And that means it must come out of one of those 6 breweries and be put at Oktoberfest. And all the other Bavarian breweries that are doing a traditional Volksfest in their town, like we do it here in Freising, then are producing not a Oktoberfest beer, they're producing a Fest beer. And this is originally produced for our Volksfest here in Freising, where we also have this big tent and amusement park, and it's temporary, so it's for 10 days. It's in the early September weeks. And we're sharing that Volksfest with the other local brewery here. So 5 days we are pouring our beer, and the other 5 days the other local brewery. And
what is the other local brewery for those who don't know? It's
called Hofbrauhaus Freising, which is it's not Hofbräu Munich, it's another Hofbräu. It's here in Freising. It's a local a brewery here, and we're sharing this Volksfest together now for I don't know, since the Volksfest exists. So the first Volksfest was 1875. And since after the Second World War, it's held every year, so regularly every year. Before that, it was in a 2 or 3 year time line. Yeah, and so yeah, and this is what we are brewing it for. But that's why we're calling it Fest beer. Maybe other would call it Oktoberfest beer, but actually it's forbidden.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think this is no big deal. I mean, the Fest beer style / Oktoberfest style is that kind of beer style that is brewed exactly for that kind of festival situation. Nearly any Bavarian town has, and you cannot imagine, even the village is very, very small, they will have at least a weekend where they are celebrating, you know? Yeah. And so the bigger the town gets, the bigger the Volksfest gets. And the Volksfest time goes from May to late October. It depends. Sometimes the Volksfest is held maybe in June because the local patron saint has its weekend, you know, and then the people are celebrating the Volksfest there. In Freising, the Volksfest is in early September because it was used to be agricultural fair and festival. And it was in between the grain harvest and at the beginning of the hop harvest, because right north of Freising and right north of the brewery, there's the so-called Hallertau, the world's biggest hop growing region. And so the Freising Volksfest marks the time in between the harvest of the grain season, so like wheat and barley and stuff like that, and the beginning of the hop harvesting season. And so it was actually a agricultural festival and agricultural fair where the people were celebrating there.
I like that. Thank you for the clarification, because I'm always a little confused by that. Jack, when you were putting this together and started using 3470, but the more pure strain, or the new to you strain, did you notice any differences in the brew house?
We actually did notice a difference. So we put a lot of batches side by side to try to understand what the differences was. And, we're still in the early stages of identifying these issues. We've only used the yeast now since June, so less than 2 months now. So we're still working it through some of those questions to figure out the best way to use it, what temperatures, how long to lager it, how it compares to our other yeast that we had been using. And at this point, we've made a full switch over to this yeast because we have noticed a flavor profile change that we appreciate and think works well for our beers.
What's that appreciation? What are the tasting notes that you get?
It's really it's subtle, right? Because you're still two yeast strains that are theoretically through their DNA are identical, but through the yeast that we're getting, we're noticing just a brighter, cleaner beer. We're getting a little bit of a less of some of the off flavors that you might develop, and we're just finding that the beers, when they're tested, we have a sensory program here at the brewery, and everyone needs to blind taste beers, give a rating for them, and so every week they're trying 2 or 3 beers and giving their feedback. We're finding that people are preferring those beers over the other beers, even when they can't necessarily explain why that is. So, okay. I think it's too early to give a definitive, but I think we are able to see that change and appreciate some of the nuance to that strain.
I like that. Matthias, I know there hasn't been too many American brewery collaborations that Weihenstephan's done over the years. I know there's been 2 others maybe. So I imagine there's a lot of folks who would like to be doing this with you, and you all are very, very selective. When you go into a relationship like this to create a beer that's going to carry the brewery name, what do you look for? What do you want these beers to represent?
Actually, all those former projects were nothing like we're looking for something. It happened just out of a situation. The first collab was with Sam Adams we ever did. It's now, I would say, 15 years ago. So it was way before my time. I was a student here at the university in Weihenstephan. So at this time, this collaboration thing in Germany here was basically brand new, and barely someone had heard about collaborations between 2 breweries. That was something that German brewers, So as a brewing student, I haven't heard about collaborations before that projects ever before.
Huh.
And this came out of the university because they were developing or doing some developings with Sam Adams at that point based on yeasts. And
I remember that beer.
And then it came out that they created a special strong beer yeast, which was very high alcohol resistant and making very sparkling beer. So Sam Adams and Weihenstephan got together. So I wasn't there. So as I said, I was a student back then. And so this connection came over the university, over the yeast center. And they made the Infinium together.
Yes.
The other project was with Sierra Nevada in 2018. And there is the background story that our export director, Markus Englet, which is my boss, my direct boss, went to Australia to the Great Australian Beer Festival, and our importer in Australia the company, and the owner is a good friend of Marcus too. He's now importing Weihenstephan also since nearly 20 years, is also importing Sierra Nevada there. And there Marcus and Ken Grossman met at this beer festival. And a few years later, the Sierra Nevada, the Sierra Nevada collab happened. Also because they met each other, then they met in the US again, and then again in Australia. And so this things also created organically. And the same was with Jack and me. When I was the first time for business in Boston, our local partner, Tim, who was working for the importer of Weihenstephan in the United States, TBS, Total Beverage Solution from Charleston. He was like, hey, you're a brewer, you want to go visit a brewery? And I was like, yeah, of course. I never say no to this, And so he brought me to Framingham, and there I met Jack and Jack Savvy and the whole team. And yeah, we geeked out there a half a day, showing around the brewery, talking about stuff. Tim said then to me, he didn't understand the word Jack and me were talking about, but the dudes seemed to be happy, so let it go, let them have their brewer talks, and then we did some events together. Jack already mentioned it. We did some Oktoberfest events together. It was the idea was old world meets new world, our fest beer and Copper Legend next to it, so that the people can see a classic interpretation and the new world interpretation. And actually, this old world, new world scheme or idea worked then for a few years pretty great. So we did kind of a lot of events together with Jack Savvy. And so this whole kind of brewery friendship developed over the years. Jack then was a few times here in Weihenstephan. Also for the book Jack is writing, I helped him a little bit to get some connections for interviews, especially at the university. And then we were sitting here together with our brewmaster, with Tobias, and so this was all those little steps that ended up now in that project in our fest beer. And as Jack said, it was one of the first connections we had together, this old world, new world event series where we had our fest beers together. But on the other side, also, I think celebrating a brewery friendship, transatlantic brewery friendship like this needs to be also done with a fest beer that you can, celebrate this. Yeah. And all this came together from one to the other. So it just started out with two brewers meeting each other, but then not just deciding, let's do a co-op. It was more a thing that developed over the years, because I will not say we are picky or selective in that, but we, as you mentioned before, John, it's like, we can bring the patience to the table because we are nearly 1,000 years old. So we don't rush anything, we don't rush our beer making, but also we don't rush into projects like this. So we must need to know our partner and have a relationship and a friendship actually. And all this was in the past at those projects. And this we found again with Jack's Abbey. And we are very happy about that actually, because we share the same values on quality, on the approach of beer, of thinking beer, of living beer, and also we see a lot of us in Jack's Abbey, but also, and I'm say this from my personal perspective, also some things that we maybe also want to be a little bit, because maybe a little bit more bold into trying new things or new techniques. And what as Walter's Brewery, we are very into our traditional styles and interpretations. And maybe this is a collab or a project like this is for us a great possibility to break out a little bit of that very traditional, situation and trying new things like this Cool Pool Hop Edition or hop varieties that we would
Sterling
never
and
use.
Adeena.
Because we're never. So for our core lineup, we're only using Hallertau hops because it's our hometown region. It's from Bavaria. We're a Bavarian state-owned brewery. So of course we try to support our local farmers and use our local raw materials and local hops. Yes, but in projects like this, we want to go thinking outside the box, trying something new. And this was also one of the first things. I was, hey Jack, I want to use some American hops with that, and something that's not that common. Not doing, I don't know, Cascade again. You know what I mean? Nothing against Cascade, great hop, I love it, but it's something maybe not so commonly known, or maybe a hidden champion or whatever. And so this was then great for us, because we could something do that we maybe not can do at home, and so that this was the other exciting thing about this project.
I like that. Jack, the hops that you picked then, since it's not Cascade, Sterling and Adeena, what did you like about that combination and what it brings to the beer, or what you wanted it to bring to the beer, and then how it wound up?
Sure. So we spent a bunch of time doing some research on different hop options, and we knew we didn't want to go American IPA hops. We wanted to find something that was unique to the US, but also had some characteristics that may be considered noble or European. And we actually trialed a bunch of hops and sampled them in beer to really figure out what these hops brought to the beer. And then we settled on using Sterling and Adeena. Both of them have some lineage back to European varieties and have some, I would say, a hybrid flavor profile of both things that are more subtle and fairly fruity in the American context. So the hops do have a little bit of a pineapple or stone fruit note. And, trying to explain the hop character of this beer, when you put this beer next to, say, Copper Legend or a Fest beer, it's going to smell pretty darn hoppy in comparison. But if you compare this beer to a pale ale or an IPA, it's not going to taste particularly hoppy. So finding that balance where you get enough hop flavor, but it's still a Fest beer in the end, was sort of that challenge. And it's why we chose to add the hops in the manner that we did and pick the hop varieties that we did. That's
cool. Matthias, have you had a chance to sample this yet? I know the beer's not going to be released until next week, but have you had a chance to, or at least experience some of these hops and get excited about that?
Yes, of course. When I was in May in the US, I also visited Boston and Jack's Abbey. And there, Jack prepared some trial batches, because Jack's Abbey is also very well equipped with a small batch system, where they can do smaller volumes to create and trial on new beers. Also, they have small horizontal lager tanks for all this. So it's a fantastic setup there and fantastic equipment. And Jack did 2 batches of our basic recipe, and then tried out the 2 different hops. And we sampled them, we talked about them, and then we decided for the hops, and we also made the last additions on the recipe. I haven't had the final beer yet, of course, because it will be packaged in the next week, but I will have it in September when I'm coming back to Massachusetts for the events.
Nice.
In Boston and around. And I'm really, really excited. I mean, we're talking so long about this thing, Jack and me, and so actually I can't wait to taste it. And and I'm really looking forward to that trip. It's gonna be something very special.
Well, I know you've just announced that this beer is coming out, but it'll be available starting towards the end of August, around the 18th or so. Only in Massachusetts and New York, Jack. Come on, man. Just where's the love for Jersey? I'm brokenhearted by that. But The beer will be out. Fest of Both Worlds. This really cool collaboration. And obviously you're doing a whole bunch of events. JacksAbbey.com has all of the various details up there where people can go and hang out with you all and hang out with you both and drink this beer. But thank you to you both for taking time and for sharing some insight on the breweries and then this pretty cool collaboration. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you very much, and also thanks for having us. And just one addition to the events. Also there we doing a kind of cultural crossover between American and German culture. We have selected for the Sunday event a classic, beer Frühschoppen, which is a Sunday morning beer and music thing that's here in Bavaria standard. It's more like a live music and beer breakfast thing with some sausages and drinking beer on the Sunday morning. And we found a German club close to Boston where we can hold this. And I'm very excited about doing a Frühschoppen in Massachusetts. And my Lederhosen will be definitely having a good time there as well as me.
I like that. Thanks to you both, really. Okay, quick programming note. I will be at Jack's Abbey for a live audience recording of this show on August 17th at 6 p.m. It's going to feature a panel of Massachusetts brewers, and we'll even have some recipes out of the Craft Brewery Cookbook. That's the book I wrote that came out last year. It'll be for sale that day, and it's also still available wherever fine books are sold. So if you're in Massachusetts or in the general area, come join me on August 17th at Jack's Abbey in Framingham, Mass. at 6 p.m. for a live audience recording of Drink Beer, Think Beer. And maybe we'll drink some Fest beer. Are you looking forward to Fest beers? Which ones do you want in your stein this year? Tell me about it. My email is John Hall, that's JOHNHOLL @allaboutbeer.com, or tell me on Twitter at John_Hall. That's also how you can get in touch with questions, comments, and guest suggestions. A reminder, go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and can read great new content, as well as the archives going back to 1979. All About Beer is on social media, Twitter, if it's still around, or X. We're on Threads. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Just search All About Beer and you'll find us. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, and I really hope you are, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com, or simply go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. A few bucks goes a long way to fund great content. If you plan on being in Colorado in a few weeks for the Great American Beer Festival, you need to check out the Denver Rare Beer Tasting. It's happening on September 22nd, and it brings together 64 of America's best craft breweries, all for a great cause, the Pints for Prostates campaign. The beer list is incredible, packed with rare, exotic, and vintage beers you won't find anywhere else. These are legendary beers the breweries hold back just for the Denver Rare Beer Tasting. It's a bucket list event for both beer fans and for brewers. You can get a look at the beer list and find more information at pintsforprostates.org. All-inclusive tickets are just $200 and include unlimited beer samples, a great buffet lunch, t-shirt, tasting glass, and a program. Money raised goes to the fight against prostate cancer, including a free health screening before the event, a simple blood test that checks for common health issues that might just save your life. That's the Denver Rare Beer Tasting, drinking beer and saving lives. Excuse me. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer still has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.